Yeah, and let's real quick talk about your recent story over at Bearing Arms on another example of this, where the ATF published a FAQ on its website for people who have registered NFA items, right? Things like suppressors, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, full, machine guns. And it said that you cannot transfer the, any NFA item to anyone else, even if you're in their presence, anybody who's not the registered owner of it. And so what's the latest with that? Because I saw it and I was, it sounded very shocking because, it's you can't ever even shoot someone else's gun with a suppressor attached to it, or go to a machine gun range and rent a machine gun.
Right. That's the thing. I mean, this was, I'm quoting here from the FAQ. The question was, if I'm the registered owner of an NFA item, can someone else shoot my item in my presence? Right. So not even, hey, Steve, can I borrow your, suppressed pistol this weekend? I just want to go do some shooting. No, not even, Steven, I see you shooting your suppressed pistol. Could I have a turn? According to this, FAQ, quote, no, only responsible person or persons listed on the approved registration may have physical or constructive possession of the NFA item. So, you had like Phoenix Ammunition saying not only was this shut down, a class 3 rentals, but saying that, if you went to work and your, NFA item is locked up in a gun safe in your house, if your wife knows the combination of that gun safe, well, she could be considered to be in constructive possession of that prohibited item. And so unless she too is one of those registered persons, that would be a felony, right? I mean, this is just it's crazy. And again, it would be a complete change of existing law.
A huge change. I mean, there's whole businesses built around this. I mean, even, I know machine gun ranges are relatively rare things in the world. There's, Las Vegas has a bunch of them. They're around. And it's sort of the most obvious thing people might think of with this. But even like your average range generally has a suppressor, a suppressed gun that you can rent. And then, of course, the constructive possession thing is massive because of the implications of how far wide reaching that implication is. But yeah, I mean, this could have people build whole businesses around this idea that you can rent out class 3 NFA items. And it's been that way for almost 100 years since the NFA was first enacted. Right. So they just put this FAQ up and seem to change all of that overnight, at least in their public position on it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
what's the latest? Is it
okay? So Ryan Petty, who is a contributing writer at Bearing Arms, Ryan's daughter was one of the victims in Parkland, and Ryan is not one who reacted with calls to ban firearms. He and his daughter love to go shooting together. He's very much still a Second Amendment supporter, but Ryan is also an FFL, so this kind of impacted him. So he reached out to ATF. I reached out to National Shooting Sports Foundation, and I think I heard back a little bit faster than Ryan did, but Ryan actually is the one who wrote this story for Bearing Arms, so I want to give him all the credit here. Larry Keene from National Shooting Sports Foundation in turn reached out to ATF, and I guess had a quicker response than we did. And this is what they told him. Quote, the Q&A currently listed on the eForms account is incorrect. In this scenario, the registered owner of the NFA weapon is co-located with the firearm, and thus no transfer has occurred. However, if the person firing the NFA weapon is prohibited from possessing the firearm, then there could be a GCA violation. We are working to correct the site as quickly as possible. Larry did a little bit of additional digging on the regulations, and he found this ATF FFL newsletter from June of 2017 that specifically says the on-premise rental of national firearms is also permitted. So, again, Stephen, the question becomes, how did this get put up on the eForms website?
Right.
It was this just some IT guy freelancing and writing gun laws in his spare time? Like, I have questions about how this inaccurate information was allowed to go live and what type of editorial process there is within the ATF to put this information out there. Because once again, it seems like this is sort of designed to, I won't say designed to cause panic, But it's I don't know. It's weird to me, Stephen, how all of these mistakes and errors that the ATF makes, they all seem to cut against gun owners. It's never a mistake that really impacts the agency negatively. It's always mistakes that impact gun owners negatively. I just find that very odd.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes to this overall idea of the agency's inconsistency and incoherence to some degree. That's really been building for the last decade or more. And it's really reaching this level now where it's difficult to take them seriously on anything they say, whether it's in a determination letter or a public statement or an FAQ on their website or a rule that they're proposing. Like it's hard to look at it and have confidence that that either they said something wrong or they won't just change their minds in short order down the line, especially for very politically charged sort of issues, because the agency feels very politically captured at this point. They certainly seem to change their opinion on pistol braces depending on who's in the White House, and their stance towards interpreting these sort of gray area things in the NFA. They always want to push those to the boundary when there's a Democrat in the White House, and they want to do the opposite when there's a Republican, and it's extremely transparent, I think, at this point. It's difficult to continue to take the agency seriously in what they say. And that's the unfortunate thing, because they have the power to put you in prison, right? And
right.
You can't just ignore them, but it's detrimental to our society that they are this inconsistent and incoherent in how they operate, because how are gun owners supposed to act in good faith to comply with the laws that we have if the ATF is all over the place on what they're saying enforcement should be?
And the cynical part of me says maybe that's a feature for the Biden administration and not a bug, right? Maybe the more confusing and incoherent the ATF's rulemaking is, the more likely the thinking would go that some Americans are just going to say, forget it. It's not worth the risk. I don't want to accidentally run afoul of the law, so I'm not even going to come close to violating it.
I think that is a real strategy that gets employed. I mean, look at the pistol brace rule as a whole. Let me ask you this. You're somebody who has read through this rule and covers this for a living, just like I am. Mm-hmm. And I asked Alex Bosco the same thing. He's the guy who invented these devices and owns the largest company that makes them. What are there any pistol braced firearms that are not SBRs under this rule? Do you know?
I don't know.
Me either.
But here's the thing. I think again that's by design, right? You're supposed to fill out this worksheet, and based on the numbers that you get and what it adds up to, that should tell you whether or not the ATF will likely consider your brace firearm to be an SBR.
Yeah, that was the old rule. They had a point system. Then people said that was too confusing, so they said, "Fine, we'll get rid of the point system." And they just don't have a system, and they sort of imply that you could maybe make one that's. In fact, so part of my story also quotes from Stephen Gutowski, the ATF director, his speech to SHOT Show, to the industry's trade show put on by NSSF. And he implies that you could have a braced gun that doesn't run afoul of this new rule. He talks about the standard set, like what you're talking about. They had a point system for these standards, but in the new rule, they just have these like 6 criteria, and they don't really give you any way of understanding. It includes things like the direct and indirect marketing of the device. So right. What the ATF thinks about the indirect marketing of the device, whether it implies that it's intended to be shouldered, is part of the standard. It's a wildly subjective thing. And then, whether the brace fits over your forearm, which again, people have different sized forearms. And if you notice in all the pictures in the brace, it's always like the most jacked ATF agent who's the one testing that. He's got these giant forearms.
Right.
And so, it really is impossible, I think, to know whether your gun complies with the rule. It seems to me that they're saying you can. Dettelbach says directly in one of the Q&A questions that it's possible to have a braced pistol that's not an SBR. But if you read through the rule, there's no way of telling how you would do that.